Hi there, my name is Quinn Sandler. I'm going to give you a walkthrough of Plantiga as it's applied to basketball. First thing we're going to do here is I'm going to center in on our team overview page, which is basically a table view that shows every athlete in one view. So here we have the entire team. We're going to go through athlete 12. So right beside the name is a radar plot. If you click on it, this shows all of our tier one metrics. So the athlete compared to themselves or the athlete compared to the team over the preceding 28 days. Next, as I move along the line here, we're going to see move time. So move time is basically of a session, how much of that session their feet were moving versus idle. Next is athlete G load. So this is the mechanical load that was experienced during the session. Here we have 297,000 Gs, so just under 300,000 Gs. And you'll see this little outline there. That outline is the typical range of this metric. So we build typical ranges after 5 sessions. Basically, the software is learning how your athlete moves. You'll actually see here that this game was far outside the normal bandwidth for this athlete. As I move along, I see the G load asymmetry. So what the load was on the right limb compared to the left. Again, you can see here that the typical range is actually quite tight, but that we have higher loads on the right limb. So in that kind of yellow zone. Next, as we move over, we have athlete intensity. So we take the Gs and we divide it by the second measure of how intense that session was. Then we'll go to impact and push off. So we're looking at the peak acceleration at heel strike and toe off. We're looking at those asymmetries. Again, that shows us movement strategy. Then we'll go over to accelerations, decelerations, and distance covered. In all of our dashboards, they're widget based. So we have a template that we think is ideal for basketball. It is easily modified. You can add or subtract metrics, variants of metrics. Here, let's say I want to look at runs and I want to pull out foot speed asymmetry of runs. I can select the table view and then boom, that's in that view. So easy to personalize, easy to subtract if you want to just to focus on a few things. Now we're going to go from the team view into the athlete view. So I'm going to click on athlete 12 here. Now we're going into the athlete dashboard. We have put in place a template that we think is ideal for team sports here, but again, you can change that really easily. So here we're looking at the 7-day accumulation of G load, intensity, distance, and speed. Below that are more activity cards looking at impact and push-off asymmetry. We're looking at loads. We have some views where you can look at 7-day or 28-day. Next, we go down to activities. So in this instance, this athlete auto-recorded the entire session. The training staff or team didn't really have to do anything except put the sensors in the shoes. When I go down and I click on it, we bring up what we call activity cards. So every session is broken down into these activity cards. So first card is move time versus idle time. So how much of that session they were moving versus idle. Next, we go over to speed zones. So what amount of time was in each speed zone? These are embedded with NBA thresholds, but it is easily customizable depending on college or women's sport or whatever. Next, we go to distance covered. Now, the thing about speed zones and distance covered is when I click on them, I get a tray that pops up. And now I'm being able to look at the asymmetries of the G load, as well as the impact and push off in these different speed zones. Next, we go down and we look at accelerations and decelerations. So not only do we count them and we bin them high, low, medium, very high, when I click on it, I get that tray that pops up that shows me what the asymmetries are in the different acceleration or deceleration bands. So here, this athlete looks pretty good. We do see this favoring of the right limb in low and medium in impact. So when the peak acceleration at heel strike. When I go over and I click on deceleration, we count them, we bin them. When I click on it, it tells a little bit of a different story. So now the tray pops up and now I can see that this athlete is favoring that right limb at impact across each zone. So what that does for the team or the practitioner side is better understand movement deficiencies, trainable deficits that you then can program to fix. So we're trying to break out movements in the real world so you can drive better decisions. As we go through these activity cards, we have G load, we have intensity. When you click on these ones, instead of a tray that pops up with the asymmetries, now I'm looking at trends. So I click on it and it pops up and I can see what the trend was over a month, or I can isolate that down to 3 months and so on. Same thing with intensity, push off, and impact. What we can do from here is we can dive deeper. If you wanted to look at this session and you wanted to go into step by step what was happening, I would go to Explore. Explore would pop up. Let me remove some of those presets. What we're looking at here is the signal from our sensors. Everything beneath the midline, so the dark blue, is your right limb. Everything above that is your left limb. If I zoom in to a section, every single peak is a foot strike. What I can now do is I can plot different metrics. So let's say we're in quarter 2 and I wanted to look at what was happening with ground contact time or stride length or speed or push off or impact. I now can select the plot and go in and look at what was happening in a step-by-step fashion. This is not for everybody. This is not for every athlete, but especially if you see things where we're seeing yellows and reds and you want to dive deeper, this would be where you go. Back to activity cards. You can see here that as I go down, actually each quarter was broken out. So if you wanted to look at what the loads were or the profiling of XLs and decels, not just in quarter 1, but how that changed from quarter 2, or looking at quarter 1 compared to quarter 4, this is where you would go. Now, this is an auto-recorded session. You do nothing but make sure the sensors are charged and in the athlete's shoes. What you can do on top of this is run structured tests. So you can go over to this record page. And again, this software also lives on an iPhone or an Android phone in a similar fashion. So you would go and imagine your athletes are wearing Plantiga. You could run a structured run test. You can do a consecutive counter movement jump, which will give you a RSI metric comparative to a force plate. You can do a cyclic jump for a modified RSI, get jump heights. But you can imagine running structured tests, playing a game, running structured jump tests after. You can go down and look at sprint, single leg jump for distance, for height, and single leg jump RSI. We like to encourage building that movement signature by collecting all of those structured tests alongside what's going on in court and practice in games. That's a basic overview of Plantiga in basketball.